You're on.
Hello, I'm Eric Zinger, President of the Hartsdale Neighbor Association, and been following along and pushing this issue for almost 4 years now at this point.
Robert Williams, Mayor, Village of Elmswood.
Aye.
Bobby, your mic
Oh,
is
your
not on.
mic is not on.
Just hit that little button. Wait.
So
All right,
So
then
we're
pull it a
basically
little
going to be
closer
discussing, getting
Got
an
it.
update from the New York State DOT as to the status of the 9A bypass.
Good evening, everyone. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
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 All right, great. Yeah, so thanks for having us. I'm Mark Tiano. I'm the Regional Design Engineer for Region 8 DOT in Hudson Valley. Mark Krug, the Project Engineer for the 9A project, was unable to attend tonight. He had another previous commitment. So I'll just be giving you a brief, update on the current status of the project. I don't have a presentation or anything like that to share, but I'm sure most of you are aware what the project proposes to do. But I'll just kind of give just a quick explanation. But basically, the project proposes to construct a roadway connecting Route 119 and the 287 exit ramp to 9A at Warehouse Lane and bypassing obviously the congestion that's on 9A and Route 119 intersection that you guys obviously are aware of. So currently we are working with our consultant, Clough Harbor. They're still on board, working through the draft design report, environmental assessment. They're progressing that. I know back probably over a year ago now, there was some stakeholder meetings and with the local officials and everyone. And there was a few different alternatives. I believe there was 3 at the time. They're currently working on a 4th alternative. Really, the concept itself is the same, just a little bit different alignment, reducing some of the curves in the alignment, making more of a straight pass from 119 over to the Warehouse Lane connection. But they're further evaluating that during their, this process, and hopefully we'll be getting an update from them and a draft report towards the end of the year. That'll at that point be, dispersed internally for review and with our main office group to further evaluate and provide any comments. So, at that point, we'll look to how we proceed. Just to note, and I know Mark Krug and others from the office that you've had contact with have updated. Currently, there is no construction funds for the project. But again, we're committed to work through the design approval process at this point.
There's been like studies and studies for probably 60 or 70 years. How likely is this, is it going to really happen, or is there going to be another study after this study? And, what's the time period? I mean, is it possible that there could be construction, say, a year from now or 2 years from now, or, before any of us reach 100?
Understood. Yeah,
is not the bypass. The issue is, should the town be constantly putting money into a fund that we're not using, when we're basically struggling financially?
Yeah, it ultimately all comes down to the funding. We don't, at my level, we don't control where the funding comes from and what projects it goes towards. Again, we're progressing the project as far as we can internally as far as the design group, but it ultimately comes down to getting the funding it needs to be constructed. If in that case, moving forward, on the current plan we're at now, yeah, probably We're looking at a 1.5 to 2 years that it could be constructed. But again, the funding has to be made available for us to get to that point to proceed with an actual project.
Would the funding be, would the state DOT have control over this, or would this be Senator Schumer, Senator Gillibrand? What would it take to really get an assessment as to whether or not the funding is going to be available to us?
Yeah, I think that probably would rise to the level of, the senators and those who kind of, control the money, and how that comes into the department. Currently, the department, in our program, it's on the program for preliminary design, but it doesn't have that construction funding made available.
Understanding.
Nope.
Understanding that this is a new iteration that you're working on, but you said the changes aren't that vastly different from alternatives 1 through 3. Can you give us any kind of guesstimate on the cost of the entire project, knowing that funding is going to come from different sources, whether it's state or fed, along with the town and the county?
Sure. I mean, the current alternatives, and I think that are being evaluated, and I don't have, we don't have a defined number at this point, until we get further into, into the design process. But, it's probably in the neighborhood of $60 million in somewhere in there.
And the town's portion would be, what is it, 25%?
Do we know what the match would be? No.
There's no determination at this time as to what the town's portion would be.
Or it
Right.
has to be.
And I think the thing that I think is most important for the town board to decide is what our plan is going forward as the town of Greenberg. It's clear, there is no source of funding that we can identify right now. It just does not exist. It is a hope and a dream that the state or the Fed will come in. We just passed the largest infrastructure spending bill in American history, and there is no talk or no chatter, nothing. No one is saying this is on the table for them. So the question for the town board is, do we think, knowing our limited resources, which we don't live in a world of infinite resources, do we think the best way of funding infrastructure in the town is segregating property taxes in those areas to only be specifically used for those areas? And if the answer is yes, I think the answer is no. If the answer is yes, the question becomes, why only this location?
The other thing is
Right.
Francis made, I thought, a reasonable, a good compromise
What was that?
idea. I thought you came up
Could you
with.
repeat that just one more time?
Yeah, I thought you came up with a good, a compromise suggestion where we would not be getting rid of the TIF fund, the previous TIF funding, but you basically said going forward, you want to highlight, your suggestion.
Right, instead of doing the A budget and the B budget, we would do the A budget. And it keeps the TIF district alive. But it addresses the concerns about, the big.
I think that would be
Amount
a
of-
great solution. Now we're talking $5,000 a year instead of 300. It effectively kills it. 98% of the funding comes from TOV properties. So if you're talking about excluding the B budget, what that theoretically does from a legal standpoint is you keep the district alive. No one, especially myself, is arguing that the money, the $6 million or so that's already in the fund, be used for any purpose other than the designated purpose. We're not trying to siphon that away, but this is primarily funded by TOV. If we were to remove that from the B budget and only have A budget taxes, I think that would be a great solution going forward.
Let me,
Yes.
yes,
But
please.
hold on, I just want to say something. Do we need the gentleman for this discussion?
Can I?
Because he does,
Yeah,
okay, because he does.
It's up to you.
Yeah,
I mean,
no,
I'm
no,
a guest
he
here,
does.
so.
No, you're the guest, I'm a guest. But we just want to make sure.
Mr. Supervisor, if you don't mind, I think they're apples and oranges. I think your conversation is going on here. To address the DOT first, I've been on the board for 30 years in the village. And we've been actively involved in this. And this is the first time that all the entities agreed on the concept, the town of Greenberg, the village of Elmsford, the town of Mount Pleasant, the county, the state, and everybody else. And we left it off a few years ago. On the table was the third ramp would come down. Right now, one comes down, makes a right to 119, one makes a left to go to Sawmill North. Well, it would come down straight and you can go left to right. Right would go to 119, left would go to the bypass. And then it would go out to Warehouse Lane and out. The village has already committed to giving you a right of way to go through the village property. That's the old stump dump next to the dog pound. And we have an access of a right of way, which is over the town property to get in and out of Warehouse Lane to get to our property. So we've already agreed to all that. Our standpoint is it's a good start. The actual best route would be to go up to Dana Road or something. And Supervisor and I had talked about that with everybody else years ago. Even Robert Martin had offered to give up 2 of his buildings there that were in the way of the project. He said he'd already made his money on the buildings and he would, get rid of them and you can, continue to bypass. The further you get the bypass north out of that intersection, the better it will be utilized. This is also the first time that all entities agreed that it would be a 2-way north and south. Years ago, it was just going to be north. So this is good that, everybody had finally agreed to that. We thank you for your constant updating. And when we left it off, you guys were going to do the environmental study and all that and get us back with a final plan to let us know exactly where it's going to go through the village property and the town. I can't speak for the town board, but I know the village is in favor of it for a lot of reasons. One, the traffic, and two, the true bypass, remember, it will create a lot of good things, not just the traffic out of the village and the town, but flooding issues. And flooding is getting worse. So every time it floods and the first intersection to flood is Warehouse Lane and 9A. That's the first one that floods, and then it goes south into the village. So there's been X amount of floods over the last number of years where that entire quarter has shut down, including 119 over the Sawmill River. And I've had 150 tractor trailers backed up on 119 waiting to get to the distribution centers in the town, which they can't get to, which that area of Warehouse Lane and Fairview Park Drive and Executive Park are all huge, just major distributions for big companies. And they got shut down for days. And, products stopped, everything stopped. So the idea, if you were to get the 9A bypass to go a little bit further than Warehouse Lane, you would bypass that flooding. So now when 9A does shut down due to flooding, and actually to backtrack, there was a fire there a few years ago on 9A and it happens to be in our fire district. So my fire department went out and the hoses are blocked across 9A. So that shuts down traffic again for many hours and everything stops. So with the bypass there, you would be able to continue from 119 all the way up to Dana Road. And if it did flood, you would bypass all the flooding. So our position is, I know the town and everybody else's position would be go to Dana Road or further. Obviously, you're not going to have the money for that now. So our stance is, yes, we would be happy with you starting with that portion of it. And then later coming back to the drawing board and go further. But if you really want to make it work, you have to go further in Warehouse Lane. Again, we're supporting the Warehouse Lane project as of now. The 9A bypass is there because it's been talked about way before I was born. And as the supervisor mentioned, for many, many years. So we would like to see that happen. I know that the town and the village would be happy to lobby the officials to do that. I don't think that the TIF money should go into that project. I think the state and the federal government should fund that. I think the TIF money should be more locally addressed to the property owners that are going to benefit from that put money into it. That won't benefit any of the entities that put money into it, that the 9A bypass won't. Now to deviate from into the TIF fund, our position is, and I spoke to many property owners this past week, and especially the largest property owner in the district who's paid the most into it and has been there the longest, that their position too would be, just has been brought up, as Councilman Chin brought up, is suspend it now. Don't collect any more money put into it. Leave it there because it's not fair that you would take the money away after they put all that money into it. Yes, there has been some minor improvements. 2 years ago, the town helped us pay for some road repairs in there. It was in the village. We did do a sewer, and you did pave the roads 40 years ago. And if I see the commissioners here of Public Works is here, so if someday he could dig out those records of how those roads were paved 40 years ago, they are the best roads in the town of Greenberg and has the most heaviest traffic on them, and there's not a pothole on them, and there hasn't been in 40 years. The roads were built from scratch, where there was I saw them being built myself, where they started all over again and put a mesh in there. I don't know what they did, Commissioner, but yes, Ed Barrett did that, you're correct. So I mean, that's something to look at why those roads are so good, but some of the suggestions would be as a yearly maintenance of the area. You know, the catch basins do collapse because of the heavy trucks, and the commissioner is always out there fixing them. After all the floods and stuff, the debris lands there because that's the bowl. You know, it's the bottom of the bowl, so you know it fills up there, and then everything comes there, all the debris and stuff. So he's kind enough to send people over there to pick the debris up. So I think the money in the TIF fund should be used for that and any other repairs that would come up, you know, in that area. A yearly maintenance. The town and the village partnered twice to already clean up the river of a lot of debris. Instead of the town expensing to get rid of that, that money should come out of the TIF fund.
I think that's a good idea. That's brilliant.
I mean, that's, you know, again, it's, I mean, it's, you know, it's,
Well, I think that's good. So going forward, we could basically, Joe, we could prepare, you know, something that would, you know, implement, you know, the recommendations, and maybe would we, I guess we would have to have a public hearing on that. And if, you know, the village and the town, if we're working together, and then we could come up with a way of using the funds, you know, where both the village and the town are working together to make sure this, you know, is done, you know, cooperatively. And then if the 9A bypass ever it becomes a reality, then we could use that $6 million.
I mean, that was great conversation where we had offered, you know, to use that money for two projects. One was to pay some of the 9A bypass, and the second one was to, if they ever did the flooding, that we could use some of the money of that. Obviously, that's a drop in the bucket for those projects, but the concept is it could pay for some of the engineering to speed up the project and to get it rolling. To back up on, and I'll give 30 seconds if you don't mind, on the flooding, the last time we left that meeting was for the first time ever, they did 5 studies on that Sawmill River already, and each one cost $5 million. And I brought up at the last meeting to the Army Corps that why do another complete study, take the old one, dust it off and tweak it from what was added and deleted, you know, like Sam's stuff. So the Army Corps agreed that was a great idea. So for the first time ever, the Army Corps was going to not only do a design a study, but also design how to fix it. So that was the first time those words ever came out of their mouth. They also said the Army Corps was 100% committed to the project and to funding it. And most of the money comes from the federal government. And don't quote me, but somewhere between 12 and 18% has to come from the state government, and the project would have been done. The state denied it. The reason why the state denied the project is because they look at it as loss. Now, everybody in that district has been flooded since time began. So what they do is it floods, they wash it down, they open up the next day, they don't submit claims anymore because the insurance claims are $1 million a year for insurance. It didn't pay. So they just clean up, go back to work, and don't file claims. But when the state looks at that project and they say there hasn't been enough loss in the area because there's not enough insurance claims. But we all know that there is, but from loss of product, from loss of you know, their buildings, loss of work, and actual damage to buildings and vehicles and stuff. But they won't fund it because it's not on paper.
I'm wondering, just, I mean,
So
you
we should
did,
lobby
you
the
did
state.
segue, but yes, but you know, I think it would be important that even if they didn't use insurance, that they documented the
It's
expenses.
all documented.
Okay,
Everybody does. They
and-
do every time. not loss
Yeah,
of everything,
so was that submitted to the state and they didn't
but it doesn't count.
count
You know,
it?
Yeah, they want to look, we would have to lobby our representatives in the state to fund it because the federal government was committed. The Army Corps was committed to it, but not the state.
I had a question for you,
Please.
and also for Rich. One of the initiatives that, you know, we're taking is we want to give a little bit more attention to flood control. The Army Corps of Engineers flood initiative, which they were studying for even longer than the 9A bypass, like probably 90 years already. They spent millions of dollars on it. That's probably not going to happen. But the thing is, I'm wondering if we have, say, $7 million just for flooding, that the town would contribute. We said, you have $7 million, and then we came up with a package and we said to to Senator Gillibrand, to Senator Schumer, to Congressman Bowman, we said, listen, could you give us $10 million? I'm saying $10 million or $15 million.
It doesn't
plus
happen
plus
like that.
$7 million if we had a chunk of, money, but it's not a full flood relief program, would we be able to make a dent in that area? And because I'm sort of wondering, could we come up with a infrastructure initiative that, where we could actually get something, done and get something accomplished without,
Well,
buying-
May
can
I
tell you
ask something?
firsthand that the project that the town and the village did on cleaning the trees that fell across the river helped big time.
For like 10 years.
I mean, it just makes sense. I mean, there were how many dozens and dozens of trees that were across the river
But-
that impeded the flow and it backed the river up and flooded, so.
But if I may, the Army Corps was hesitant because they did a couple of studies and they basically said, we've done studies and didn't go through what, and so, you didn't want us, we don't want you, basically. But I think in the new infrastructure package, they're looking for like shovel-ready-ish projects. I think I did see something about that and it's worth looking into. And, there is funding fed and state and it would make sense to lobby our state and federal officials or our state officials to allow the documentation that substantiates the expense for
And
that.
the history of the Somme River, as you know, you had to do the bottom end first. So they did Yonkers, they did ours, they were supposed to come to Greenberg Elmsford, and they never got here. And it stopped. So in all fairness, the project really shouldn't be dead.
Right.
It's just, like I said, because of all that, the state didn't recognize it yet. But I think if they were really made aware, they flood more times than Mamaroneck did, and Mamaroneck got the good press. And, everybody felt bad for all the homes in Mamaroneck. No disrespect for everybody's watching from Mamaroneck, but.
Well, there was some
in-
life
in the
lost
Greenberg Elmsford
too.
area,
That
we've
was
been
what.
flooding a lot more and a lot worse than Mamaroneck did. And, but they got the good press and they said, well, let's go to Mamaroneck and fix that.
Well, Mr. Mayor, if you can resurrect
Well,
that
I
study
suggest-
among.
Well,
us,
we have them, we all have them. I suggested to somebody and that we should get together with the county, and the county hosted those meetings. They were done in the
Right.
planning commission, commission's office. I
And
forget the-
Norma
before her.
Drummond. Oh, before her.
Yeah.
Okay.
That
was a long time ago.
Panel was there. But I know the county executive Latimer would be more than happy to do that because
Sure.
he has contacted me after the flooding,
Mhm.
and it was very interesting. He said, Bobby, what can we do? How can we work together to
Right.
help this? I know
Right.
he's very interested. I know that the town is. So I think that we should ask the county to reconvene those players, including the DOT, and get them at the table and say, what can we do to get this going again?
Okay, that is something that we really should address. It is taking us a little bit
Yeah,
afield from the
and I'm
TIF
sorry, but
district.
he-
So we should
yeah, but
bring it
go-
back, but
But going back to the DOT, I think that, I don't think the town should spend money yet. I think that the state and the federal government should fund that, and let's save the money for the people in the area to put money into it, because the 90 bypass won't benefit anybody in the district. It doesn't do anything for them. So why should we spend our money to that?
Well, it will help them get out of their side streets.
No, because some of them can't get onto the bypass.
Yeah.
But if
Oh,
you're- if
coming
you're-
out? No, not really, not this.
And if you're coming down Beaver Hill and you're not waiting for all these trucks.
The
to-
biggest traffic that comes out of there, comes up there in the morning is the county from the transfer station in Yonkers. That's the most traffic that you get. But the traffic isn't as bad since they fixed they went from an F- to an F in 11990 square. They made the left turn lane longer, they made the light longer, so it's not as bad as it used to be.
I've
it's
never heard of
bad.
an F-.
Yes, there was an F- for
An F-.
40 years. Now it's an F. So
I
we're
s-
gaining-
I-
we're gaining that. I'll take it.
Eric, you look like you want to say something.
I mean, I'm just, if the TIF district 9A bypass is not even going to benefit the people, the 9A property owners, it just, if that's really the case, it just seems a no-brainer to stop contributing money. We just talked for 30 minutes, right? We are no closer to a source of funding for this than we were when we started. There is no source of funding until that becomes, and for 70 years, it hasn't become a realistic proposition. And this is 0.5% of our property taxes every year in the TOV area. That is not an insignificant amount of money, okay? So if we talk about a world of finite resources, I want to bring it back to the town board's role in this process. That's why I'm here at the town board work session. And the town board's role in this process is to decide how we should best invest and allocate our taxpayer dollars. And the question before you is, do we think segregating property taxes from certain areas of the town to only specifically benefit those areas of the town is the best course of action in a limited resources environment when there is no immediate, we're a year and a half away from a study, we're 25 years away from finding the money, right? The money is just not on the table. And I know that the mayor is very excited about this project and very excited to spend TIF money, which primarily 98% comes from TOV residents, to clean up the Elmsford area. Okay, I know he's very excited about that, but we need to look at who is funding this and whether that is the best use of our tax dollars. And that's why I've asked the town board to consider stop allocating $295,000 a year that could desperately be used for road maintenance, for EMT, for police, for parks, for all of the other things that we have an immediate need for, and allocate that money to our existing needs.
But
I think we had consensus on that 20 minutes ago.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, no, I just said
Yeah,
that's the exact same thing you just said, that it shouldn't be used, but you also.
It shouldn't be used for anything.
You also, if you remember, that there were also sewer districts in every community, and those people that put sewers in communities paid tax just to that sewer district. That's no different from the TIF district.
Well, that's actually
No,
very different
It's
because
not at
hold on.
all, because the sewers only benefit those people, just like the road
Let me
construction.
finish.
And I'm
That-
talking.
The sewer district is a
Wendy.
separate additional
Let-
tax that they pay.
Eric, let him
Eric, you
finish
gotta-
district.
responding.
You gotta be respectful. So let me just say this. So we're talking about the TIF district. Do we need the gentleman from?
Yeah, I just have-
Do we
let
need
me-
the gen-
Can I just
hold
ask
on,
one
hold
question
on.
about the?
Okay, so
Paul.
I just, so if,
Yeah, let's be.
wait, let's be mindful
Mindful
and
of his
respectful
time.
to the gentleman's time. Do we have questions?
Yeah, I have
for-
one question.
Okay, so let's
Okay,
ask them.
last year, when I went to the Paws Cross, the no-kill animal shelter, they were concerned because they're building, actually, they're completed, I'm pretty sure, they're a new building, and it was right near the proposed 9A
It was
bypass.
in the past.
And they were worried about it, and I'm sort of wondering if the new design will impact or put the Paws Cross new building in jeopardy.
That's a question for Mr.
That
Triano,
was
right?
the question
that
for
was
the
it.
gentleman. Okay.
I mean, you guys were familiar with the old alternatives 1 through 3, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, so really the main change with that, the fourth alternative that that we're currently looking at, it really is just more of an alignment change from the intersection off the ramp, where you can come down from 287, take the left, right, from there underneath 287 viaduct, and where it actually ties back in on the curve by the animal sanctuary there.
So the animal
I-
shelter would
No,
not
yeah.
be-
So there's very little change. What I was trying to say is just
I
very
think
little
there
change
was-
The DOT
to
just
that
said.
tie-in point there and the alignment at that point. So the impacts that were there kind of with the previous alternatives or probably still exist with this one. I wouldn't say it makes it any worse or better.
But I
It would- it
think
would
there
come under-
was,
it would come
I
under
think
287.
there was some, when we were there, a year ago, whenever it was, we were there. I was wearing a different hat being there, but I think there was some potential conflict. Garrett, you know what I'm talking about, right? And I wonder if that has been taken into consideration, make sure that the state knows that there has been a change to the property so that before you proceed with your alternative 4, you make sure to make accommodations if that's necessary, just to survey that building to make sure that there's no conflict.
Okay, yeah, we can take a look at that and see, see if that is, has changed anything part of the current plan.
The last one went under 287, like you said, and made a sharp right and hugged the village property closest to the south side. And then went almost to the bike path and made a left and went up the road that's there now and went to Warehouse Lane. So it would be, we have the vacant property there, so it would go through that on a piece of it, on the most southern side of it, and then get to the bike path and make a left and then head north.
There was
So it
some
would be
conflict.
Far away from the,
Okay, because there was some potential conflict, I think, with the parking area. It's just making sure
Yeah.
that, it's just doing that double check.
Yeah,
So
no, it's
now
good
that
call.
the state
Yes.
is aware, they can do the survey and make sure everything is copacetic.
Okay, so the bottom line is, we're gonna change the law. We, what's the time period that, we could basically enact
So is this
something?
question, because
Right.
you need.
No,
the
we don't
gentleman-
need,
Okay, so thank you so much.
Mark?
Mark?
Thank you, Mark.
Yes,
Oh, okay,
I have a
Mark,
question.
sorry.
yes, sure. Thank you for having us on. And again,
Wait, hold on, Mark.
Before
I'm
you get
sorry.
too happy about
Hold
signing
on.
off,
okay, go ahead.
what is your next benchmark that you intend to reach, and when do you think you will reach it?
Again, like I mentioned earlier, we're looking to get that draft design approval document from the consultant, the draft EA. And then, again, look at that. We would do an internal review. And again, that would be coming later, towards the end of this year.
The second part will come later to the end of the year, or you'll get the draft at the end of this year? You gave us two benchmarks, basically. One, you getting a document, and then you reviewing it.
Yeah,
what-
well, yeah, towards the end of the year, once, and again, I don't have a set
Both.
exact
They're
date
both.
in hand. But once we do have that, it's normally something that once we have internal review and it's in our hands, we can turn those reviews around internally in our region, within a few weeks to a month. And, and then also we would be sending to our main office counterparts as well to review.
Thank you very much. And
Thank you.
we'll be probably contacting you for a similar setup at the end of the year.
okay, so
Okay.
we're all on the same.
Hold on. hold
I
on.
just wanted to answer
Hold
your
on,
question
hold on.
from earlier.
So wait a minute. Do
Yeah,
we
but we don't
this
need
gentleman?
Mark.
Okay, so thank you
Thank you,
again, Mark.
Are you sure? I can hang out for a little bit if you
Okay.
like.
So thank you.
Gary
again.
has your
Thank you,
number.
Mark. And we really,
Yes, you know how to contact us. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out and we'll be in touch. Thanks again for having us.
Appreciate you.
Thanks
Thank
again.
you so much.
Yep. Have a good
Thanks,
night.
Mark.
Take care.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Just to answer your question from earlier, how do we change the plan? The state law does allow for amendments to TIF districts. And you're right, a public hearing would be needed and a resolution would ultimately need to be passed. So I will begin work on that.
Okay, so so we were all on the same page. Could we just summarize exactly what we're gonna change?
we're going to remove the B budget funding.
Okay, so we're,
Awesome.
Well, and we should also take a look at exactly what work was approved in the first resolution approved in '80s and just ensure that any additional work you want done should be added in the new resolution as well. You can modify that portion of it if necessary.
Very good.
Thank you so
Okay.
much.
so, Mr. Mayor, you have no problem with that?
no, I mean, it's in the town where I think the yearly maintenance would benefit the town businesses. I recommended, you do like the commissioner's been doing, just keeping up with the flooding debris, keeping up with the catch basins, cleaning them, like. you
And
always
using
do,
the TIF funds for that?
I would, if it was mine, yes. I think that would definitely benefit the people that are there, because that's, again, it was their money that was put
Right.
into it, and that does help. As anybody knows, you keep the catch basins clear, you keep them maintained, and it does help, even though when the water, the river comes up, the water in the street can't go out anymore, but at least until that point, it will help.
Okay.
It definitely buys time. So,
Should we-
and then any kind of debris in the river that we can jointly work, I'll be happy to do it again with you.
Yep.
Partner with the town again to get in the river and clean it as much as we can. We did the big pieces, maybe if we had time to do a little bit more, it would definitely help more, but
Should we
That's up
have
to
like
you.
a joint, like, since part of the TIF district, it was funded by residents of the village and most of it's unincorporated, would it make sense? So either, so nobody gets slighted or gets annoyed with each other, for the, maybe for the commissioner during, say, the budget season, the capital budget season, to propose like an annual, say, TIF, TIF funding and say, okay, we're gonna be asking for, $300,000 this year for TIF maintenance, and then we could send it to the village of Elmsford. And you could say, oh, this is a good idea, or it's a bad idea, and then we'll move cooperatively on the spending of the dollars.
I think that's a good idea. I
And-
think the commissioner could definitely put together a small budget of that area, what needs to
Each
be done
year.
every year. Yeah, and so come to the board and say, I need.
Right,
X
and then
amount
you
of
could
dollars.
basically.
And it might
say,
be a bigger project that he needs or whatever, and then he could come to you and say, I want to use that kind of money, yeah.
Yeah, I think
And-
this is good.
Yeah, and I think that it makes sense to advocate, we can jointly advocate with our state officials to get recognition of the alternative ways of paying for the flooding so that we can perhaps resurrect the engineering study from,
Garrett,
Yeah.
we would have to, I'm sorry.
No, the village is just happy that you welcomed me to the meeting and asked me to participate, so we appreciate that right there, so.
Jared,
We're gonna be working together, so there's no separate.
And the 9A
we don't
bypass, to be
separate.
clear, it's a good idea.
Okay, yeah.
Like, I don't think anyone's opposed to it. I think it would be great if we could coordinate with the mayor and our state representatives to get state and federal funding for this. This is still a good project that it has a lot of merit and good value. The question and the thing that I always kind of go back to is the way the town is funding. We should, work, it's a good project. No one, the people I talk to who don't understand how, no one's opposed to the 9A bypass. We want to be clear about that. It's not about blocking the 9A bypass from happening or anything like that. It's about this $295,000 that goes essentially nowhere every year and needs to be used now. So,
Joe, would we be able to, since we're gonna have to have a public hearing on this?
That's correct, yeah.
So could we put it on the agenda for next Wednesday?
I think that's a little
That's-
too
so we have to
soon.
write it first?
Yeah.
No,
We need to first
Yeah.
put into effect what changes you
Right.
want to
Let
the
us do the work
document.
first, and then we'll put it on the agenda. I don't think we need a rush here, but.
Yeah, because
Let
it
us do
needs
the work
to, it
first.
needs to be set on paper before you
Yes.
have the public
Yes,
hearing. There's
please.
proper
Yes.
noticing.
Would you
Yeah.
like to do like a 5-year capital project going out, or you just want to look at it yearly based on his needs?
Whatever.
No,
I think we need to just sit down and figure that all out. Let's
Yeah.
do our
Yeah,
homework.
we're not gonna
first,
do it
and
now.
then we can figure out what our next steps are
Right.
going to be.
I just don't want this.
No one's leaving.
It's not Paul.
Order
It's
dinner.
not Paul. Eric's advocating, the mayor's advocating, we're all jointly working together, commissioners here. Let us do our work and then we can. move
What
forward.
anticipated timetable would you recommend? No, I'm just asking.
But
like,
Eric, sorry, not Eric.
It's just habit for you, Jim.
Yes, I'm sorry. Paul, I promise you, we need to do the work first, so I don't want him to give a time and then that time. 'cause
Let
that's not
him
fair to
look.
him. So let us do
And
the
and
work.
while I go through the
Yeah.
law.
It's been in
I will
place for
send the
70
follow-up.
years. We don't need to dismantle it in
Right.
7
No,
days.
exactly.
Okay.
Let us do
But
let us do
I'll
the work.
also send the follow-up email after
Mm-hmm.
this meeting to get the ball rolling. What else we need, what other data we need to collect to get the changes on paper before we have the public hearing.
Thank you.
All right,
Thank
thank you
you.
so much,
Thank you,
Joe.
guys.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
thank you, Mayor. Thank
And if
you,
anybody
Eric.
has any influence with the Army Corps of Engineers, it would be really
Helpful.
helpful.
The Army Corps was on our side,
It's not
100%.
the Army
Yes, I
Corps.
know, but
It's
river-
a state. If I can remember her.
all we're doing is taking the
Jody
big pieces out of the
McDonald
river.
was
It's
the
not dredging it.
Was
Right.
that her name?
I'm sorry?
Jody McDonald? was that
No,
her name?
Joan McDonald is
No,
no
no, no.
longer. Oh, okay. Oh, you mean from the Fed,
From the Army Corps.
from Army Corps?
But
No.
dust off those records in the county, in the county planning.
Yeah, but
department.
we need you to dust off your records.
No, I have them, but I mean, you have the records of the meetings that we had. They were in the planning conference room.
Mhm.
And they were chaired by the commissioner at the time. Forgive me, I forget his name.
Okay, but
But-
between us, because you have to come up with the Army Corps of Engineers study too, we
Yes.
talked about.
Well, we all have them. Yes.
Well,
Okay.
that's why I was asking you, because I
There we go.
don't think of it.
Okay, that's the whole we have to do.
Okay,
All right, we gotta,
Thank you.
we gotta.
Federal
we gotta
government
work it
funding
out.
requests.
Okay. Thank you, I
Thank you.
appreciate you.
Thank you.
Good to see you. Thank you so much. All
Thank
right.
you.